Hello and welcome everyone. ADV here. I am delighted to have Matthew Zoltan here with me today. And we're going to get into a discussion about natural meditation. And I thought it would be appropriate, if we're going to talk about meditation, to have a moment with Matthew and myself to just ground and center yourself, because we know there's so much stimulation going on out there and it's ever growing. And we need tools to manage what's happening. And we're going to present a tool that you can use throughout this podcast, and describe meditation. But let's get started with actually experiencing it from the master himself. I know he wouldn't refer to himself as a master, but when you've been
Thank you.
meditating for over 20 years, I think you can go there.
Me,
So
45 years.
Oh, sorry. I mean, of
That's all
course,
right. That was
45
Kate.
years.
Yeah.
My goodness. I've been doing it 20 years. That's where I got
Oh.
that one. But you're, way beyond. So let's just center everyone and get them
Yeah.
focused. And thank you for being here, Matthew.
Thanks for having me. So that was a nice introduction. Yes, I like the way you dropped the word that I wouldn't call myself a master, because basically mastering ourselves is not really what meditation is about. It's really learning to allow ourselves to be exactly as we are. So being with ourselves exactly as we are, we'll move into this short meditation just to calm everybody for preparation for this discussion. And so the easiest way to let your thinking go is to not make an issue of it at all, but simply come back to listening. Just bring your attention to listening. And when I say bring your attention to listening, deeper than that, I would like you to see what it feels like inside your ears when you are listening. So just bringing yourself, all of yourself, back into the feeling of the activity of listening. And how does it feel? What does it feel like when you're just listening? And the feeling will be inside your ears. As my voice is creating the sound, and the sound is vibrating in your eardrums. So your experience of sound is the vibration in your eardrums. Just feeling that. Just feeling the feeling of vibration, the feeling of sound in your ears. This is your natural sensory ability, which you cannot turn off. It's happening all the time. Just listening, just receiving the sounds of your environment. And in receiving the sounds of your environment, you are also receiving the feeling of your environment. So listening to my voice, you are receiving the feeling of me speaking. If someone is yelling at you, you receive that feeling. So not only are we receiving the sound, but we are receiving information beyond just sound. The information of what's going on in our environment and what's going on for the person speaking. And we all do this every day, all day, just listening. Thinking is irrelevant. It has nothing to do with listening. Listening is a purely physical sensory function. Find that out for yourself right now. Explore that for yourself right now. And as you're exploring the sensation of sound, the vibration in your ears, notice how you actually feel the sound. You are feeling it as a vibration or a sensation in your ears. So then sound, all sensory functions are received, causing a certain vibration in the body, in this case, in your ears. Now, just notice how that sound and the feeling of it actually takes you deeper into your body. So you're listening to the sound and you're feeling how the sound affects you throughout your body. Just feeling into the sensations caused by the sound of my voice. Feeling your own physical presence in connection with the world outside of you through your sense organs of hearing. So now you're feeling the sensations of your body. This is the primary and most important aspect of meditation. Thinking is not relevant when you're meditating. You don't need to think. You just let your thinking go on in the background whilst you explore the real living experience of you in the body. Starting with the sound vibrating in your ears, dropping deeper down into all of your body, or the parts of your body that you most easily feel. Just feeling the physical sensations of yourself existing as a body right now. Okay, so just a brief little introduction to
That
a
was
very
wonderful. Yeah, I'm gonna put.
pleasure.
I felt like I'm like listening to you on the app, and it's sort of surreal when I'm familiar with your voice in doing,
Oh,
in listening
yeah.
to the app, and then I'm like, this is surreal. This is you're here, and do I take the earplugs out, or the earphones out yet? No, it's a beautiful example of the teaching, and we're gonna launch into that
Okay,
in depth to help people, even though this is very didactic. This is the thinking part,
that's
right? The thinking,
normal. That's okay.
it's normal, yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I was very interesting in just sitting with a sensation. It reminded me a little bit of the beginning part of Vipassana meditation.
Okay.
um, right? Remember with Goenka Ji talking about for 4 days in that 7 day silent retreat, or 10 days rather, you are just breathing through your nostrils and focusing on that sensation. You're,
Yeah.
you're exploring that sensation and you bring your focus back to it every time. That is still different from what you just did,
Yes.
because I I noticed the difference. That was where my thinking brain went when you were we
No,
were
that's
we were
good.
doing it. But
Go
it
ahead.
was, yeah, it was interesting because I was like, I see the subtle difference here, because that was almost
Mm.
like I had to force myself to keep going back to the nose and keep going back to the nose, right? but that's not natural.
No.
This is natural. Just I'm just listening like a wave coming in and out from the shoreline, as if I'm just the witness, not making it go somewhere or making my attention go back there continually. I'm
Mm.
allowing the inflow and outflow and exploring the sensation. And it was interesting because I felt connection of my ears to my heart when you
Mm.
were doing that. So I was getting other sensations and it
Yeah,
starts to just unfold naturally. So I find that fascinating. Do you want to explain just a few
for sure.
differences of
Yeah,
this meditation?
it's
Yeah.
good that you've picked up on that subtlety. That subtlety is probably picked up on that simply because you've had so much experience of meditating. It's not exactly something new to you, but also because you're able to receive things outside the box, which meaning that even though you've been meditating for 20 years, by what you've just said to me, then it shows me that you're not encapsulated or enslaved to what you've been doing for 20 years. You're able to actually explore and be open to something that, although it's only subtle to notice it at first, but once you really understand the difference, which you've already picked up on, you'll discover it's completely different. And the reason it's completely different is because, as you said, when the person says you're coming back, okay, coming back to the nostrils, as you were saying, focusing on. So when you're coming back, the question is where have you gone, and who is that you that's gone somewhere, and where's it come back from? I'm not worried about that question. I'm just throwing that in there. And the other thing was when you say I'm focusing on, or I'm aware of, or I'm observing something, there's a separation there. There's a division there. There's a duality there. Yeah, and that duality is a very minor, but still a form of disassociation from the real self that you are, what from the body of you. So that disassociation is very difficult to detect when you're using thought-based meditations. And when I say thought-based, even though we're focusing on the breathing, and that doesn't seem like thought-based, that seems like it's breathing-based. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm focusing on the breathing, or in my approach, we're focusing on the breathing. But as you mentioned about the Vipassana, you're focusing on the breathing. What and when I say this is thought based, I go, no, it's breathing based. No, that the breathing is secondary in this approach, in the Vipassana approach. The primary thing is a mental connection with your breathing. You know, I'm focused, which is a mental act. Yeah, the mental act of focusing, or the mental act of being aware. Yeah, or the mental act of observing. This is the observer, or the awareness, the one who is aware, is a separation from that object of you, the object of you. So this is problematic in the sense that it turns meditation into the opposite to what it's for. Because whilst you're doing this, whilst you're observing your thoughts, or imagining that you are, whilst you're thinking about your breathing, what you're overlooking is that the thinking about your breathing is, in a traditional approach to meditation, it would be considered the activity of the mind, or the activity of the I, or the activity of the me. And I'm not necessarily going into that right now, but the activity of me focusing on breathing, or on my breathing, there's no need for that. The breathing is happening, the body is already breathing. So until we are simply in the breathing of the body, which we already are, by the way, this is not an effort based thing. You are breathing right now, and there is no way you can escape that breathing as a physical sensation. Yeah. So why do we need to make an effort to focus on something that is already happening of its own volition? And when something's happening of its own volition, it's a natural thing. It's also not a conjured state. Yeah. It's not made up. It's not in any way brought on by some meditation technique. Yeah, it's not the result of it's not a thought-based outcome. Oh, sorry, a thought-based result. It is actually something that is there, which we're simply not noticing. Or I wouldn't say not noticing, it's not the right way of putting it. Something that is there that we've become so involved in thinking that we're simply not connected with what's really going on, already going on inside of ourselves. It's just a distraction. But the fact is, it's already going on. So why make an effort or even a technique to know that you're breathing? How do you know that you're breathing? You can't know breathing that way because you're thinking about it. You're focusing on it. Yeah. How does the body know breathing? How do we as a living organism know breathing? In fact, I'll go so far as to say, how do we know anything? Yeah. It's not actually through thinking. Thinking only describes what the body already knows. So, how does the body know? The body knows, understands itself and life in a very different way to the thought process. So the thought process describes things that exist. The body is in its own living experience of its own existence. You see, it's a big difference there. Yeah. So,
Mm.
I am in the living experience of me, and the living experience of me is not mental. It's actually a sensory, sensational experience. It's known to me because it's there. And not only so, how do I know? How does the body know that it's breathing? Because it feels itself breathing. And when I say feel, I actually mean the whole functioning of breathing, the physical sensation of breathing is happening automatically, and it will change in its own needs. So sometimes I'll breathe heavy, sometimes I'll breathe shallow, sometimes I'll breathe deep. I'm not in favor of controlling that breathing unless you're trying to, maybe jump into a cold bath of water or something of that nature, but you can use it for specific things that we do in life, like ice baths or whatever. But when it comes to meditation, the reason I call it natural meditation is because it's how is this living organism of nature presenting itself? How is it expressing itself? How is it already? How am I already? And how do I know that? Only way I really know how I feel, the only way I can know I'm hot is because I feel it. The only way I know I'm cold is because I feel it. The only way I know I'm sad is because I feel a sensation that thought calls sadness. Yeah. But I can't know sadness by thinking about it because the word is not a living thing. You follow me? So thought is just an image that describes something that's alive and experienced. Well, not I shouldn't say alive and sensed. Yeah. So the thought sad does not, the word sadness doesn't contain what we are calling sadness. They're quite, separate things. So in this sense, this separation between what we are in our natural self as a expression of the natural world, as that which we were born as, that is something quite different to thinking. So thinking is not a living thing. Words are not necessarily living, although people like to, spiritualists and so forth, like to do something with that. But we'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. And I
Yeah, we
can,
have to cue the music now. Feelings, nothing more than feelings.
yeah,
It would be a
it's
good theme
very,
song.
yeah, it's a good theme song because people don't know how to feel without thinking about their feelings, just like people don't know how to breathe without focusing on their breathing. Yeah. So when I say how to breathe, it means how do I know I'm breathing? And how do I know I've stopped breathing? This is not an intellectual or thought process. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
and
completely
it's
natural
it's
thing.
it's essential. I just want to reiterate for the audience how what you just said and how profound and important that is, because to differentiate knowing and thinking, it's not generally people think they're the same. If I
Okay. Yeah.
study, then I know, right?
Yeah.
If I think about a thing long enough, I will know it.
Yeah.
And this is also how we have individuals who are not trained or do not have a specific kind of study, and they know because they're able to go within and feel who they are and live the lived experience fully
Ah.
and access the wisdom that is natural. It is all pervasive, let's say. It is that we are, and we just have to access it. But what's happened here, in my opinion, is that
Yes.
we have separated from our wisdom body, from our wisdom feeling self, into just up here, all up here,
Sure.
and all out here with the eyes, and out here everything's this, and we're looking for answers in the wrong place, right? But one thing, so that's profound, that's really important, and that's essential, so I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
But
Thanks.
I was thinking about this as you were speaking. In conscious circles, and I was trained very much in the new age style. With all, I had a spiritual teacher teaching me. I'm sure you walked all these same paths. It's like a
Yeah.
journey that we take, right?
Yeah.
When I was on that part of the path and taught a lot of Hindu based and Tibetan based Buddhism, a lot of it
Okay.
was about consciousness. So it brings the
Yeah.
question up, right? What is consciousness?
Okay.
Because I was taught consciousness is actually splitting the self, like you said, doing that divorce of the self, witnessing, turning around, witnessing the self, and essentially trying to not judge. But let's be honest, you're going to do that. Right? You're going to be the harshest critic ever. And what my teacher says, pour the waters of consciousness over you by visualizing yourself, by witnessing your own self. And I have done this, and I teach it, and
Okay.
I think there's a place for it and all that, whatever. But there's something profound about doing that as opposed to the integrated self. And I
Yeah.
think we may come apart to come get together again. That might be part of the path, but here we are, right?
Yeah.
And
Here we
we're
are already.
now.
Mm.
Yeah. So if you'd enlighten us a little bit about that a bit
Sure.
further.
I'll have a crack at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not that it's difficult to talk about. It's more it's a subtle thing to communicate. Yeah. Um, now, part of the reason is because of what each and every one of us perhaps puts our own slant on a certain word. Yeah. So I think what I like to do is to understand anything. What makes it really simple is bring it back to the pure and simple physical facts of the body. Now, and also when I say physical facts of the body, um, don't be too caught up in the idea of what does it mean to say I'm a material person or I'm a spiritual person. Yeah. The materialist will think of himself in a certain way, and the spiritualist will think of themselves in a certain way. So these are just different ways to think of the very same being, or not mean. I mean, I'm a different person to you, but if I think about myself as a spiritualist and you think about yourself as a materialist, essentially we're both thinking about that same thing, but we're just thinking about it through a different lens. Yeah. So the lens is the confusion. The lens is the confusion. So if we drop the lens of whether materialist or spiritualist, then we don't get caught up in that argument so much between the spiritualist is saying that we're a body of light and the materialist is no, we're a body of matter. But really, these are just conceptualizations of the living fact of what we only know by feeling it. We don't know what to call what it is we experience as being ourselves, as ourselves existing, but we all can be quite sure that when you're listening, it's very much the same as when I'm listening. Yeah. We're not that complex. We're complicated, but we're not complicated to one another because the common ground is right now, our living experience is fundamentally exactly the same. Okay. How we interpret that as a materialist or a spiritualist is semantics, is just intellectual and quite superficial. Yeah. So I'm bringing it back to your question on consciousness. So let's say, or actually, I might start with what you've been mentioned about. No, I'll just go straight with consciousness, so we don't get too caught up in so many things. Is that but go a little closer. Let's have a look at. We'll start with physical sensation. Yeah. So each and every person that's listening right now can feel physical sensations. If they are living, they are sensing. Yeah. And of course, they are living because they're on the podcast. So they're listening to the podcast. So if you are alive, which you are, then you experience the fact that you're alive only one way. How do you know you exist? It's because you feel it. Doesn't matter what you think of that, you feel it. I think that's fair, or you sense it, whichever way you want to put it. When I say feeling, I am talking about the physical feeling of you existing. Yeah, the feel and everything that goes with that, whether you're sad, whether you're happy, however you happen to be. So in a feeling, you have your physical fact of yourself, but you also have, you also know how you are. You also know what your needs are. You know how you are, with your hot, with your cold, with your sad, with your hungry, with your thirsty. You know all of these things and a lot more. You know what you are, you know how you are, what condition you're in, and you know from that very feeling what your needs are, and so on. And all of this happens before you ever think about it. This is not thinking. This is just what you know in a feeling, in the feeling of yourself. And the other thing is, you know you exist, not in the way in which thought tells you you exist, but in the way which you can't actually describe that effectively in a thought. And I can't really tell you I can't tell you how I'm feeling right now and actually succeed in that communication, because only I know what it feels like to be me right now. Only you know what it feels like to be you right now, regardless of our intuitive, or our ability to sense outside of ourselves how another person is going. That is not the same, or the same quality that we have in our ability to feel our own presence. Does that make sense? So we feel what you feel in your own presence, and what I feel in my own presence. That's unique to me. That's how I know me. That's how I know everything about me, is what I'm suggesting. And that's how you know everything about you. And that's what feeling, or the physical sensation, is for. Yeah. To know everything about you all the time as you're changing from second to second. Yeah. And then your sense organs help you know everything about the world around you that you need to know, that's relevant to you. And that changes from second to second. So we have this massive information that's going on sensorially as a physical sensations of the body functioning. And then we have this massive amount of information coming into us from the world outside of us. And in that sense, through our sense organs, we are receptive to and connected to the world. Yeah. And we, in a sense, if I hear a sound, I can't separate myself from that sound in the act of hearing. So this is my connection with the world. I'm not really separate to that sound, or it's there and it's also here, but I actually really only know it here. So essentially, I know it here because this is where I have it. This is where it is for me, the living organism. Yeah, I know that sound is there. I mentally can say that sounds from over there, but my living experience is pretty much contained within these boundaries of my sensory abilities. So what does that feel like to anybody? We talk about, what does that sensation of you feel like? And if you're feeling that as an immediacy, because that's the only way you can feel it, you can't think about that. By thinking about that, it doesn't help you experience that. In fact, yeah, it will take you away from that experience. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and I feel like
so
it's a denial that even a lot of the other meditation practices and spiritual beliefs take you away from your body and denial of the body, and
Yeah.
also leading to what I've found and what I've had to heal actually doing this type of meditation for so long, and I'm still healing it, is this too much self-awareness. I am too
Okay.
like pin droppingly aware of my existence and how I think other people are seeing me. So as I did that practice of looking at myself, I also put that puppet head on all the other people. And so now they're also the judges, and they're also, so you become too self-conscious, and that's not flow, and that's not you being in your knowledge body and being present. You're stuck in past and future, depending on where you're coming from, and it can be
This is
nerve-wracking,
great.
and then you're not in your knowing energy, you know?
This is very good. This is your own exploration, your own discovery, and you're seeing the problematic nature of traditional approaches to what is called meditation. Yeah. So I'm gonna. It's a lot you've said there. Just in that on that initially, you started by asking me what is consciousness, and to make it really really simple, if we don't separate the word consciousness from the word awareness from the word sensation, consciousness and awareness, as you clearly put, tends to be a separation, and we are aware of ourselves. We are conscious of ourselves. Yeah. But when we come back, when we drop that separation, then all we have is the sensation of our own existence. And the feeling of that physical sensation for most people for most people, particularly long-term meditators, would be very much the feeling of saying awareness or the feeling of consciousness. It's it's seemingly a thoughtless awareness, a thoughtless sense of our own existence. But as you very clearly put it from years of experience, is that when you actually separate yourself and become aware of yourself or become conscious of yourself. And I would, this is where I'm going to throw a huge spanner in the works, that the human species, it's particularly because of spirituality and religion, has is very proud of the fact that they all think of themselves as being evolved over other animals because of self-consciousness. Okay. And self-consciousness, to me, is the real problem that we have. Self-consciousness is, one, it's completely unnecessary, and two, it's completely delusional, because you can't actually think about what you are and know that as it is. You think about anything I think about, and you just said then, when you put that hat on, you're judging yourself. So when you judge yourself, you're thinking about yourself through the form of judgment. Yeah. So the thought process of judgment. But even without the thought process of judgment, which is more harsh, you are thinking about yourself. Yeah. How does one think about themselves? And what happens when you think about pretty much anything is you create a type of a variation on what you're thinking about in your thoughts. In other words, it becomes just a perception of yourself. Yeah. And so however you think about yourself, however you mentally describe yourself to yourself about yourself, is not what it's really like to be yourself at all. Yeah. So you can't actually think about yourself. You actually only think about the thoughts that you have been taught to think about yourself by society, by your parents, by outside influences, and then which you've taken on and you've learnt to think about yourself because of those cultural belief systems. So you'll have something you'll judge where, if you are criticizing yourself in the thoughts about yourself, I, I'm just going to make a bland statement. I can guarantee you that is not your thought. That thought has not come from you. It has not originated with you. This has been learnt, and you've been taught to think these things. Because as a body, there is no concern about the way I am. No concern. There is no right, there's no wrong, there's no good or bad. Yeah, there is no concern about the way I am, because I'm fully equipped to deal with the way I am, however that happens to be. And the only way I can know how I am is when I am that way, moment by moment. There's no time to think about it. Yeah. Now, why am I conscious? I'm not conscious of it. It's a physical sensation that really I can try and avoid, but and we do that through thinking processes. But really, that physical sensation is the ongoing life and condition of me, known to myself moment by moment, automatically, without choice. I can't do anything about that. Yeah. And this is the other thing. We like to be able to think about ourselves and think about life because we think by doing that, we can control life and control ourselves. And this is the whole idea of self-consciousness. But as I'm just trying to point out there is you cannot be successfully conscious of yourself and hit them and be on the money. Yeah. You will miss yourself every time. The only way you can know your own existence is because you exist and you are within that existence. Yeah. You can't actually think about yourself successfully. So self-consciousness is a real problem, as you've just pointed out. And it's a really interesting thing because the spiritualists will think that self-consciousness is a sign of evolution. Yeah. For example, that we're a self-conscious evolving being. Really? Okay, so let's look. I'll have a look at that. So I'll take off a little bit here because it's fairly strong topic that you brought up. Yeah. So really, what is this? How is the spiritualists viewing the spiritualist or the religious person? How are they viewing our existence here on the planet Earth? How that the basic view is that we are not this body, but we come from somewhere else to come onto this planet Earth and to go through. And when we first arrive, wherever we arrive from, we are incomplete and needing to go down a journey of discovery because somehow we're ignorant, we don't know ourselves, and we need to improve on that self. So the basic theme of spirituality and religion is that we start out incomplete, and if we follow all these religious paths or these spiritual paths, somehow we're going to end up complete if we're lucky. Yeah. Enlightenment. Enlightenment to me is just a fabricated state of thinking. But we'll go back to that later. The other view, I'm going to throw a completely different. How about this approach? How about what do I know? And this is what occurred to me, after 7 years or more, less than 7 years as a monk, and I'm meditating away. And what started to occur to me was that all these ideas that I have about myself create every single experience that I have. So every meditation experience I have is based on this idea or that idea, and that without those ideas, I couldn't have those experiences. So those experiences were not self-evident. Yeah, they were all fabricated states, but it doesn't feel like that once you've done it for years. Once you've done it for years, it feels like you're actually experiencing this meditation or this enlightened state or the self-realized state, not realizing that what you're experiencing is the result of repetitive thinking that ultimately becomes quite an automatic function. Like the way you learn to think about yourself, if it's poorly, then you will probably find that after a few years of thinking that way, you generally feel crappy. Yeah. So, but you're causing that without realizing it. You're causing that because that thought process of thinking poorly about yourself has become automatic. So then what we want to do is go and learn a meditation technique to think other thoughts about ourselves so it feels better. But really, we're just playing around with the same superficial level of thought-induced states. Yeah. So I would say enlightenment is a thought-induced state. Yeah. We can think about being compassionate. That can be a thought-induced state as well. But a thought-induced state is not the real thing. It's a fabrication. That's why we have to keep doing it every day. Yeah. So when we look at the alternative to I've come into the world as something incomplete, and I've got to spend my life trying to achieve some state of completion, the alternative to that is self-evident. So that is an idea. All that stuff is an idea that we've invented to think about ourselves and about the world, but we're the only animal on the planet that does that. Every other animal on the planet is born out of its mother's womb. It's born complete. It lives a life which is complete, and it dies. Well, we do too. Yeah, this is all I've seen myself. All I know of myself is at some point I was born and I came out of my mother's womb. And in coming out of my mother's womb, I've actually, on a larger scale, I came out of the natural world. I came out of this natural world. My mother's body is made up of all the things that the natural world is made up of, and I've come out of this natural world via my mother's body. And I've come into this natural world as an expression, a unique expression, sure, but an expression of the whole world, an expression of the natural world. Yeah, and when I say the whole world, I don't make myself big. I'm just saying I've come out of this whole world. I'm still a part of it. And today I'm still a part of it. I'm not at any point yet separate from the world. I still exist integrated with every aspect of this, what we call physical planet Earth. Yeah. So I'm a part of this world. But the thing is, I was born complete. There was nothing wrong with me when I was born. Yeah. And as long as am allowed to then just be that expression, I will actually be, I'm quite sure, and I've seen this in my own life, that I am actually a unique expression of something relatively new that no other human being has expressed before. But all other human beings have something very unique to express as well, so long as they're allowed to, so long as they get a chance to, and not many people do get a chance to. Yeah. So, I mean, I was interfered with as well. Don't worry, I didn't get a chance to all the time either. But then what happens is I'm born of the natural world, and there I am. I am part of this natural world. There's nothing to achieve. There's nothing to attain. I don't have to improve on myself at all. I'm not here to improve myself. I'm here like any other animal, and that is just to live as a complete and whole being, completely functional, already completely sensitized, complete with all the things that religion tries to give me. For example, because I'm a sensitive creature, because all of us are, it's very difficult for me to do harm to another person. Yeah. Because in doing harm to another person, if I'm sensitized, I will feel that. And that will stop me. That will hurt me just as much as it hurts them, if not more. So this is a self-governing machine or living machine, yeah, that we don't need morals and concepts to apply to. Yeah. But what happens, I'm chucking a lot in there, I know, but what happens is at a certain point when we're children, what are we taught? We're taught what to think. We're taught how to think. We weren't born thinking. So thinking, to me, and when we're taught to think, this is the first point of disassociation. Because when we're taught to think as a child, at some point, we're all taught to think. Before that, we were just ourselves. Yeah. And obviously, there's other problems. There's traumas and there's nasty things that happen to us. But putting aside those nasty things that happen to us, we're born a sensory being. We know our environment through our senses, and we know our sense of ourselves within that environment. We know everything we need to know already without ever thinking about it. It's all there. And we know, and that knowing changes every second according to how we change and how the world around us changes. It changes as needed. Yeah, we don't have to make any effort to accumulate knowledge. We have the knowledge, the knowing that we need sensorially, moment by moment. And then we're taught to think. And when we're taught to think, we're fairly young. And when we're taught to think, there's mummy says or daddy says, "Oh, look at your pretty little nose. You're a cute little thing, aren't you?" And it's like, "Oh, you got beautiful fluffy hair," or whatever it is. And what are they doing there? They're introducing self-consciousness. So you become self-obsessed. Yeah, or that sounds pretty hard. You all of a sudden are friggin' worried about yourself because you've learnt that you're pretty and you're fluffy and you got a cute little nose, or you've learnt that you're ugly and you're awful and you're too fat. You've been told these things by your parents, and being told these things has an effect, and that effect is a feeling. Although that feeling is based on a falsity, it still has an impact, and that impact is the embodying of a idea of yourself that isn't naturally there. Yes, so this to me is the first disassociation from myself as a living organism into some personality of myself. Yeah, and I'm not going back thousands of years to find that. I only have to go back 63 years because I'm only 63 years old. So I only got to go back 63 years. You probably only have to go back 35, 40 years, whatever. So you go back. Was that a bit of a,
Okay,
maybe, okay,
49,
doesn't
49
matter.
years, but I love that you said that.
49. Okay, 49 years. Okay, so we look after ourselves. So you only have to go back to the time before you learnt to think, before you were indoctrinated, before you were harmed, all of those things. And if there is a before, because a lot of people are harmed very, very early on, if there is a before, you'll find there's a sense of yourself there that actually feels perfectly fine. Yeah. And also perfectly unique. And how we learn to think about ourselves is the beginning of almost like, homogenizing the human species and turning us into drones, turning us into destroying our individuality, because that individuality is not something that we can learn from culture or something that we can learn from anybody else. That individuality is something that evolves as we grow up. Yeah, and I don't mean evolve in the sense of an improvement. I mean it comes out of us day by day as we get bigger, as we get older, as we get stronger, as we go from a child to an adult. We are, in that sense, finding every day a new part of ourselves. We're discovering ourselves every day. And we're discovering something very, very unique. I'm absolutely certain of that because that's been my own direct experience. And I'm just the same as everybody else. Yeah. So self-consciousness, as you've said, when you start to meditate, it becomes it shows up as a big problem. So that sensory being has grown up, but if it's left alone, we're not, who knows what level of intelligence. Well, the level of intelligence is certainly going to start with, we won't be doing harm to each other, because intelligence equals sensitivity. And the intelligence that I'm talking about is our natural physical intelligence and natural living intelligence, that of the sensory system of every system of our body, all our nervous system, our endocrine system, our hormones. This is all intelligence. This is all a flow of information. Every function, my muscles, my bones, even, they all are informative. Yeah. And not only, but also informative in a way that is to know myself and my needs, but also to know my world and my world's needs. Yeah. So I'm interactive. I'm a part of this world. So I'm born as a natural person, yeah, out of my mother's womb. I didn't come into this world. I am part of this world. Yeah. And so then eventually I may die. Yeah. That may be exactly what happens. Personally, I don't give a damn. What's it matter? Yeah. What I do know is I'm alive. And I'm alive now. And how do I know that? Exactly the same way you know. Exactly the same way, because you can feel it. If your hand is numbed out with a anesthetic and you can't feel it, you can think about it, but you can't really know it's there. So you talked before, you said about knowledge and knowing. Yeah. I have the mental knowledge that it's there. Big deal. It doesn't help me. I need to know it's there. I need to be able to feel it for it to be relevant to my own existence. So knowing something is quite disconnected from the living experience. If that helps to go with what you said before. There's knowledge, which is information about things. And there's knowing, which is an inside sensory experience of your own existence and exactly how that is. So this is where this meditation is very much about the inside out experience of yourself, that whatever you are is already there, already functioning. Even if stuff's been put in there and caused you damage, that's also there. Now, if you just sit quietly for your meditation, or what do you want to call it, just sitting still, and don't apply any more thinking to yourself, then what starts to happen is you begin to start to resensitize. You start to sense yourself again. And that sensing is something that comes to life within the body of you. It's coming from within you. So this is like your own natural meditation. This is you coming to life and coming to know yourself as you are, because that is coming to life inside of you. And if there's any pain or trauma or damage, that will come as well. Yeah. But that can't come and won't come if you're applying a technique or an outside in approach, an opinion of yourself, or an idea, or a methodology, anything you apply to yourself to make yourself any different to the way you actually are will completely block that process of, when I say completely, not completely, but it will block that process of the body doing what it needs to do to recover from life day by day. So I've thrown a lot in there, I realize, but what I'm really looking at there is an inside out approach, which this natural meditation of the body is. And there's an outside in approach, which is every single other meditation on the planet.
Mhm.
And that is the primary difference. Yeah. All meditation, even though that we might think that we're feeling the, like you said, you can use Vipassana to get in touch with your sensations. But if you really look closely, not criticizing Vipassana, I'm just saying, if you look really closely, you'll notice that thought is the primary thing there. The intention to do something and achieve something, and the attention to doing it is very different to having no intention whatsoever to do anything or achieve anything, because there is nothing wrong with what you are. You simply need to experience or sense yourself exactly as you are and just be yourself, for the natural processes and the healing processes of the body to reactivate. So the body starts to heal of its own volition. But
I
let's
have
see.
I
You
have
say,
3
you
things
speak now.
there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember them all because I'm like, "Ping, ping, ping."
Oh, sorry. Cut me off.
No,
Cut me
no,
off. Don't
it's
forget
no,
I
this
said
is
that.
great. Yeah. Well, okay, so, one of them is in some of the meditation styles, that I was taught, is to try to have no thought, or the clouds go by, you're not
Yep.
thinking, so you're trying to not think, but the trying to not think is still thinking, and I always was stuck there because I'm like, "Oh, don't," I was confused of what I was trying to do through a lot of that,
Good.
just try to empty the space, but no one said, "Just feel." Don't,
Hey,
like, if they just did that, it would have all been solved. It wouldn't
exactly.
have been this conundrum of how, "Oh, there's a thought, bad me, just let it go by, just let it go." And interestingly enough, I used that for a while just to get my thoughts clear and write them down and get it out of my head, and I used that method to just clear debris of reminders, things I need to do, because the laundry list would come up, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, maybe
Yeah.
that's what this is about." I'll just do it that way, right? But if they just said feeling, that would have been I would have got understood that immediately, because as you said, this is natural. And once you're guided that way, it's like, oh yeah, well, duh, almost like it feels so real that it is part of your natural being. The other thing I wanted to say about children, which
Mm.
kind of broke my heart a little bit, what we
Yeah.
do to children, and I could
Oh,
feel my own inner child just screeching at that one, because
cringing.
yes, cringing, and all the schooling and all the, and then that would lead to existential crisis, because as you were talking, I was like, well, how do we get into this, because I get stuck into existential discussions and discourses and thinking all the time, and I don't want to. Because what happens is I lose myself for the world, and I have no business governing the world. I have no business controlling the world. That's not what I'm here to do. That's not who I am to become. And so I get in a conundrum of existential reality of, why am I here? Who am I? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? Like, this stuff
Yeah.
starts happening. And if we just didn't mess with the children at the beginning, that wouldn't be even a thing. That wouldn't
They wouldn't.
even be, you wouldn't have a midlife crisis. You wouldn't have an existential crisis. You would know, and you would be living your purpose automatically without having to go, oh, what career should I be in? And like, all of that gets wiped away. So that is massive. That is a cultural revolution, ultimately, from just that sea change of the way we're approaching our children and teaching our children. And then the third thing was my own experiences when you were talking about the suffering or the pain or whatever happens inside. Well, I happen to have two experiences. I'll just explain one of using the Undo app and being in a situation where I couldn't overcome a sensation. And you teach in that, and you show there's one meditation that helped me so much where it takes me deeper. So here's first I find the sensation like what we did at the beginning with the ears. But then you take it deeper and you're
Yeah.
like, now what is it really taking you to? The
Hmm.
layers. And I was suffering from a migraine and nothing would touch it. And I surrendered. I was trying to sleep. I couldn't. I had a good cry of it, and I put on the app, and I had your voice walk me through that meditation, and I went to sleep. And the next morning, I woke up pain free, and I realized it was because I had addressed the root of that. I had gone
Yeah.
into the layers of that. Same thing because you were talking about annoying sounds, and I had an experience of an annoying sound where I used that same thing, and it was outside the window at a hotel. I couldn't control it. It was like an AC. It was like a low rumble, it was like in my
Yeah.
head. And so the first thing was, I'm going to call the hotel where I'm going to change the room. I'm going to, I was getting all haughty about it. And then I remembered, wait a second, I have control over this. This is inside my body. The sensation is literally inside my body. So why should have control? I should be able to see what that is. So I decided I'm just going to go in. I went in it more. And I'm like, I'm going to peruse this. And then the sound literally dissolved away because I realized it was my judgment and my upset about the sensation, which I have control over, that was causing me the distress. And that was specifically
Yeah.
from your teaching. So I just wanted to bring that in because
Yeah. Good.
there's so much here, but it solves many issues
Yeah.
by doing this. Not so pain, existential crises, like child rearing. There's a lot solved here. So I wanted to get that across.
This is very good. I'm going to pick up on one point that you brought up about thinking and trying to do something about thinking. It's going to be very deep and very difficult for people to understand this. When I say deep, I don't mean to make a big deal out of it, but we are very addicted to thinking. And because we think so much, we don't ever see, or very rarely does the average person see thinking not being there. Yes. So because it's a repetitive thing, what happens is the thought process seems to be existing all the time. And we seem to be thinking all the time. So the origin of thinking is very clear to me. Yeah, it's very clear to me. And that is, it is the pressure of sensation in the body. So the sensation in the body is the origin of what becomes my thinking. So if I won't say I'm hungry for no reason. I'll say I'm hungry because I feel hunger. So the feeling of hunger triggers the thought process of and the language that we've learned, yeah, to express that sensation. So uh, I'm hungry I'm hungry is a thought process that originates as a sensation of being hungry. This is a very basic thing. I'm hot, I'm cold. So this is very basic, I know, but it's still the basics all right across the board. They go right across the board of any thinking process that we have is coming from a sensation in the body. Is something in life has stimulated us and we respond. Yeah. So we're stimulated, we respond. Or there's stimulation inside of us that's unresolved issues and whatever. And that keeps us thinking about things we don't like. In this case, you just use the example of the sound of the air conditioning. So the sound of the air conditioning is annoying because there's something inside, mostly it's because there's something inside of the individual that is in a state of agitation or annoyance. Yeah. And so as you resolve that internal sensation. So the thinking that would come out of that as a reaction to the trigger of the air conditioning, it becomes lesser and lesser and lesser. So just to make this really simple, the coming back to the feeling of you sitting in the body actually has the effect of dissipating and dissolving the driving force of all of our thinking. So you don't have to try and resolve this thinking or that thinking. You know, psychiatry and psychologists and spiritualists have all these things about super consciousness, mini consciousness, different types of, subconscious, unconscious, conscious, super consciousness, goes on and on and on. This is all intellectual dissection of sensation, of simply a sensation in the body. And when we think about a sensation in the body, we label that sensation, and therefore we cause that sensation to seem a lot more attuned to that label than it really is. Yeah. So this is called, emotionalizing a sensation. So we emotionalize a feeling. The more we go down that track of thinking about what we're upset about, so that feeling or what we think of being a feeling gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we can't stop because the feeling gets really strong. And so that just drives the continuation of the complaint of our thinking. Yeah. So the only solution, and the simple solution, is to come back to the feeling of all that. Don't worry about dissecting it. Just come back to your body and let your body take care of that. What I mean, come back to, of course, you haven't gone anywhere. You've just got caught up in a thought process. So when you understand that that thought process is nothing other than a mechanical function, you also understand. Okay, I'm saying a lot here. I've gone a little bit far, but anyway, you also understand that it is not actually a real thing. Okay. The feeling is not a mechanical function. The feeling is a physical sensation in the body. And this is what we were born doing. We were born sensing, we were born feeling, we were born as any other animal or organism on the planet. And we were taught words to think. We were taught complex language. Yeah. Not that the cat doesn't also think, but in a very basic way, which we all term awareness. The cat sees a bird, and it's highly unlikely the cat is looking at the pretty colors on the bird. I would assume he's just going food. Yeah, it's very basic awareness of his needs. Good, I want that. I want to eat it. So, but that awareness is thoughtless, should say, wordless thinking. This is where people get really lost in meditation as the years go on. They start to give this awareness, which is a thoughtless thinking, which is still disconnected from the fact of what I am, in observance or awareness of what I think I am or the world around me. So this is very subtle, though, very, very subtle, to see this, that there's nothing wrong. Awareness is a part of the animal that we are. We're aware of certain things, but awareness is fundamentally our recognition of something. Our recognition of something is our thought of something. Thinking is to recognize. When we just sense something, so there's a sound in my ears, I don't know what that sound is. It's just happening. I was sitting down upstairs today, and there was a sound going on in the background. Actually, not sitting. I was in bed actually. Yeah, and anyway. It doesn't matter. There was a sound going on in the background that, at a sensory level, that was obvious. Yeah, but at a cognitive level, it had not occurred to me that that sound was there. So, in other words, I hadn't consciously recognized that sound. And then I consciously recognized that I hadn't recognized that sound. Yeah, there's a sound there. So, there is a sensory experience that has no problem with anything. No problem with anything. And then there's the conscious recognition of something, which turns it into something quite different. So that's, to me, the thought process, whether it's a complicated language or just a very basic awareness, like an animal, like the animal that we are, of something separate to me. But in our natural state, we are not really having to think about anything. And so we're not bothered that much by anything. Not meaning we don't feel pain or we don't feel, sadness and so forth. It's just we don't mind feeling pain and we don't mind sadness and we don't mind all the different sensations that are happening because we're not taking it further than the felt sense of that sensation. We're not thinking about it and turning it into a mental or physical ailment. Yeah. So a physical ailment is the buildup of tension and imbalances in our body that come about, which we'll talk about after another question, that come about because of the constant thinking about ourselves, actually, yeah, rather than experiencing the sensation of ourselves as that happens to be, which will then automatically be resolving itself. So when you're feeling sad, if you feel it and you continue to feel it, eventually you won't feel sad. The sadness will pass, but you've got to feel it to its end. If you interfere with that process by complaining about the fact of sadness or being sad, then you'll turn into a more exaggerated state, which is caused by thinking. So what I'm getting at here is sensations that we have. There's different intensities of sensations that are going on in the body all the time. But the spiritualist, the psychologist, and the religious person has added a lot of talk to those sensations and turned them into massive problems that naturally they are not. So if you can come back to the sensation in the body without having to intellectually or verbally describe or understand that, just feeling that as it is in the body, you've come back to the source of thinking, the origin of thinking. And in the origin of thinking, it's not so complicated. Yeah? It's really simplified a massive problem. So you come back to that origin of thinking. It's not always easy because sometimes it feels like shit. But the more you do this, the more you come to understand that thinking is not really a problem. It's all we have to do is come back to the feeling and the sensation driving that thinking to dissipate and come to an end. Now, the other thing I started to say, which is going into quite a lot, is when you talked about the meditation experience of observing your thinking, or thinking about your thinking. This is and trying to stop your thinking. That's right, trying to control your thinking. Now, this is every technique under the sun is out there trying to control our thinking. But this is the assumption that there is something there to be controlled. Yeah. So all these techniques are totally delusional and superficial. I know this sounds a hell of a thing to say. They're totally delusional. They all create separation from the real thing. So, what I'm trying to say is even a child knows that the images of their thinking are just imagination, just images, that images aren't really there. We just think they are there in that sense. So, imagination, when we think, we have created every single word we speak. The human being has imagined and given meaning to those words. So, those words are creations. We've invented words. Yeah. They don't really exist. They're just tools that we've created, but they don't exist in their own right. They look like it does when you read a book, but actually we give meaning to those words. Yeah. So we use those words to describe real things, but we also use words to describe things that aren't real. Yeah. And when we use words to describe things that aren't real, that's clearly imagining, clearly imagination. So whether we describe things that are real or describe things that aren't real, there are real things and there are the imaginings of things that don't exist. But the action of thinking itself is itself an imagining. It's an imaging. Yeah. And so it's not really there. It's not really there. This is a lot
This,
to say, I know.
yeah, if I just can interject on one thing,
Please.
um, this has implications when you're talking about intensity of feeling and with childbirth and labor, because there are women I learned of that have orgasmic births.
Okay.
And I was fascinated. But that's painful, you know?
Yeah,
How could this happen? And now I understand because see all of the fear and all of the programming that's put upon us when we're going through the childbirth process, it's very external based. Is my baby going to be okay? Is the birth going to go well? You've got all in types of involvement from whomever is around you poking, prodding you, and taking you away from your internal experience, which I think is by design. But
I
if
do
you
too.
could really just be present, just like I said, I was with the pain of my migraine and I traversed it. Same idea. That's what these women are doing. They are actually going in, and I do talk about this to go toward this the intensity of the sensation rather than run from it. That's the way to pass through the pain, is to go to it, not the other way. But more than that, it's away from the layered beliefs and all the work during pregnancy to the birth. I would say would be to shed all of those beliefs, all of those fears by getting reconnected and sensationalized inside of yourself. Then you're so fine tuned that you can, wherever the body is telling you to be inside, you can be with that. You can be fully present with the sensation and allow the guidance system that the baby actually guides the whole process, really, to flow in a way that is not even going to be as the outcome that you had the fear for and all of that, because you're in a
Yes.
relaxed state. You're not listening to little birds in your ear telling you all the bad things that can happen, all of these sorts of things. That makes sense to me now. Whereas,
Okay.
because that describes what they're doing in those orgasmic births.
It's a very good example. Yeah, it's a very, and something very important of this is that because it's people suffer so much through the natural processes of life because this mostly because they're so denaturalized, so desensitized. So in that desensitization, or at that point that we taught to think, yeah, at an early stage of our childhood where we're taught to think, that thinking gives us this extraordinary imaginary capability, and this capability of identifying with things that aren't ourselves, with imagining that we are something that we are not, that we are someone that we are not. Yeah, this is extraordinary when you think about it, that we can actually through thought create these images of ourselves and identify with these images, and by the repetition of these images we actually create an experience that aligns with those images, which then backs up our belief that we are this or that way. So if we feel badly about ourselves, we're taught to think poorly about ourselves. All we have to do is continue thinking about ourselves in that way, and eventually we will feel exactly that way, and that will back up saying, oh, there's the fact, there's the proof that you are this or that you are that. Meditation techniques do exactly the same thing, by the way. Exactly the same thing. It's just, to me, they are just self hypnosis. They are a form of programming and by design. And I think all religion and all spirituality is actually, because any thought process is an addition to the organism that you are. So the organism that you are is your sense of self, is your sense of self, not a complex, detailed idea about yourself, but a moment by moment, continual, inescapable sense of yourself. And what happens when you're taught to think up personalities? Oh, you're a pretty little girl. When you are, in other words, when you are introduced to self-consciousness, to thoughts about yourself, what happens is you actually create a way to escape into the imaginings of those concepts about yourself and desensitize by that escape. So in other words, you've learned ways to avoid yourself, to deny yourself. So you become so preoccupied with so much thinking that you numb out to the actual sensory experience of you as a living organism. And people are happy about this. This is not a good idea because you're also losing contact with your natural intelligence, which is the sensations of the body constantly guiding yourself. Yeah, ourselves guiding ourselves, not something guiding me, but myself constantly guiding myself, constantly guiding myself through the processes of life, which also means self-healing, regulating, self-regulating, and so on. Knowing when I'm doing harm and stopping and not wanting to do that harm, because I'm not knowing that when I'm doing harm because to myself or someone else, because it's an idea, it's way deeper than that. I know that because it feels harm, it hurts me. It disturbs me. So we don't need all this knowledge. We function far better without all this knowledge. So the point I was going to make there though is that at this point we start to think about ourselves, and then we're trained in school to think about ourselves, and then off it goes for the rest of our life. We are given identities and we grab hold of this, and because we've already at that early stage have lost the felt sense of our own existence, we feel empty and at odds with the world and ourselves. And so we feel empty, and so we're looking to fulfill that. And to fulfill that means we go off and we go off and try and identify with this, be this person or be that person. And I would say that religion and spirituality would not exist if there wasn't such a thing as a traumatized person, because a disassociated, traumatized person is looking for answers that the person who's not traumatized and not disassociated recognizes as the facts of life every day. But the traumatized person can't handle the facts of life, the simple facts of life every day, because they're in so much pain and so much confusion and so much distress. So they can't handle that. So they'd rather opt for these delusions of spirituality and religion that offer something outside of that. But the point I'm trying to make with the lady giving birth is that at an early age, we're given this option to disassociate. We're giving this way, if you like, to actually lose all sense of ourselves, or most sense of ourselves, not realizing this is also causing us to lose all access to our own intelligence. And our own intelligence means that we know for and from ourselves. We're therefore not dependent at all on what other people think or say they know. In fact, it doesn't matter to us what they think or say they know, because if it doesn't fit with my sense of myself, I will reject that. Yeah. So our own sense of ourself also gives us this ability to not come under other people's influence, or at the very least, to be very aware of the sensation in us when someone is trying to influence us in any way, shape, or form. So with the app, I've really nailed or very clearly exposed a number of different topics. And what I've seen is the main 13 topics in a way, and you wouldn't think you could reduce life down to that, but it's not that complex. Actually, when you reduce it down to what are the fundamental things that the human being has lost intelligence about, has lost their own intelligence about, and how do we reignite those in the human being? And to reignite that in the human being is surprisingly easy. Surprisingly easy. The negation of the bullshit that they've been fed is a lot more difficult. Yeah. And this takes a lot more to get through that bullshit, because beliefs and ideas that we have about ourselves have then become that which we identify with. And now when I'm challenging a belief or that you have identified with, or any individual has identified with, I'm challenging what they feel to be them. They feel that's me you're challenging, rather than just an idea that I've picked up along the way. And it's not actually challenging them, it's challenging this stranglehold of thought that is through their beliefs and ideas that they have got from the outside of them, not from the inside of them, that have been imposed and impregnated and imbibed in the human body as a sensation of tension and distress in the human body, which ultimately distorts the function of the human body and leads to any physical or psychological illness in the long run, therefore creating a greater need for medicine, which I fundamentally don't agree with. So this is a big thing. I know I've brought up a big topic here, but this resensitization with yourself is just coming back to the body that you are. This is something that anybody who's using the app or working with me, they're going to have to find that out for and from themselves, because I'm not here to tell anybody anything that they don't already know. I just want to help them discover what they already know. And part of that is to remove what they think they know and only believe. And belief is just fake knowing. It's not really knowing anything, it's pretending you know, but it still has a powerful effect. It has the effect as though you do know. I know this. I know God exists. Really? Yeah. Because you've thought about it so often that it's become part of your experience. So this is the problem that we're up against as a human species, is how can we bring us back to our natural state where we are all no longer at odds with one another, because we start to realize we are exactly the same. And it's just all these ideas that have been fed to us that are causing divisions between creatures that are not actually divided, other than through the way they're thinking about themselves and one another.
Matthew, this is genius. And it also removes the need for the empath, the idea of the empath, the idea of the medium, the idea of the healer, even, because ultimately, it's fascinating because my path has taken me to the Yummy Doctor, which is about doctor thyself. My
Yeah.
goal is to help the individual find the inner doctor
Yes.
and not lean upon any one being for answers or what's going on inside their own vessel, inside their
Yeah.
own bodies. And this journey has been interesting because I know that I've had to become the rescuer a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
And it took a toll upon me to do that. And I realized I was making errors in just saving people, rescuing people in this way without helping them guide to. I mean, I would do it somewhat naturally and ask them to tune in these sorts of things, but
For
I'm
sure.
talking. This is different. This is a true authority, bringing them back to their true authority in every sense. And so, but you wouldn't need. So I held on to the empath label for a good while, thinking that I have to almost go into someone else's body, like we were talking about earlier, which is
For
a
sure.
delusion, because I could never, but I could
But to some
resonate, and
extent, you can
to
sense
some
it.
extent, I
Yeah.
mean, I could resonate, I could
For
put
sure.
myself in their shoes and I could
Yeah.
resonate, and I could get enough answers, and it was workable. It was workable, even if it wasn't perfectly accurate. And the process, though, of instead of having the idea that, which is quite egoic, to do that, is to instead help that person and guide that individual to their own answers. And there would be accurate, it would be no guesswork ultimately to do that. And it would teach them the path of now what to do next. So I find it interesting that this is the goal. The goal is to create that powerful individual who really does know thyself. They really do um have
Yes.
the training or the know-how to ask, instead of the outward projection always of everything, and to lean on hopes, beliefs, and other words and influences for their guidance, which eventually, I would say, because of the natural world, will lead you back to yourself eventually, because you'll either hit rock bottom with addictions, right? You'll
Yeah.
be on the street eventually, right? Because that path eats itself.
Yeah.
Um, and the same thing relates to the information increasing, as you said, because we're trying to now correct the misinformation with more information. We have so much information now. We're getting AI involved because we're like,
Yeah.
well, how are we going to
Can't
deal
keep
with all
up.
this information? How are we going to learn it faster and more? And
Yeah.
these VR headsets where you have like 10 screens going at once, and that is the end of the end, and why we see that as the end of us, because that is the complete divorce and split and schizophrenia of the self to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Instead of the inner wisdom, ultimately, you don't need to address the AI because you are beyond that. You know, nothing can compete to what we are. We've just
No.
lost it. We've just
Yeah.
lost ourselves. And this is the crisis point that we're in, to find ourselves once again. And we can do it hard way or we can do it the easy way. And so this presentation is about the easy way. And as you said, there is grace in, offered in the simplicity of it. It's difficult because we make it difficult, but ultimately truth comes down to simplicity. And I
Mm.
do want to just start to go where you were headed there as
Okay.
well, which is about trauma, which you touched on in a few places, but we did want to bring it there as well, to the
Okay.
disintegration of the being through trauma and how to correct that through this inner guidance.
Okay. Good. Just to a little thing I just wanted to mention. I do think that when you're working with people, that it's not that you're. I don't think it's egotistical, although we could think that. It's just you're just trying to help people. Yeah, and you're not delusional necessarily to think you can help people, and you are still being quite sensitive. Like I notice, my body, your body, and my body, our bodies do change their vibrational frequencies according to the people in front of us, and so in that sense, we can feel in ourselves what we need to know or about them. Yeah, I don't think that's quite
Mhm.
fair on you. What you,
Yeah.
yeah, where you go. I think you do that. You're highly sensitive, and that drives you a lot to um, what you sense of the world is a vibration of your own intelligence. And this is the direct intelligence of the body to be able to know what's going on in the world or in another person. But how does it know that? It literally mimics the condition of that person, literally mimics as a vibrationary frequency. Yeah. The often does. I'm not saying there's many ways, but this is a fundamental thing that I think you'll find going on. And the other thing that you mentioned was the empaths, yeah, and or the healer. And I think again, you and I have grown up in in an environment which is imposed on the natural world, which is superimposed on the top of the natural world and on top of the natural being or person, the natural person that we're born as, has had this societal input injected into them that is completely an imposition on the individual. Now, this has caused a lot of trouble, all our problems, actually. This has caused all of our problems. Now, we're dealing with problems that shouldn't even exist. Yeah, like we're dealing with mental states that should not even exist. The human being would never naturally find themselves in that condition. And by being a healer or a therapist or an empath in this day and age, we are dealing with the most, so far, in my opinion, the most declined condition of and most unintelligent condition, the most desensitized and disconnected condition that the human species have ever been in. At least I can know that as a fact for 63 years, the rest of its history. Yeah. But in this last 20 years or so, we can see that this has an escalation, that the thought process gets worse and worse and worse and worse. It really starts to go crazy. Now, you're trying to understand that crazy shit. And I'm trying to understand that crazy shit. And it's stuff that we really should never have to come into contact with as a human being, because it shouldn't even exist. And we have to, things that you know about, you don't need to know about for yourself. Things that I know about, I don't need to know that stuff. Yeah. But other people need me to know that. Other people need you to know that, if that makes sense. And that's actually quite a strain on you and I. It's quite a strain to have to take on and to delve into some poisonous very, very toxic conditions that individuals have got themselves into. And I'm not saying that as a criticism of the individual, but to do that as an empath, you're coming into contact with that vibration. You're coming into contact with that disturbance. And it's very, very hard on the individual to do that day in, day out for dozens of people. Yeah, it's very, very hard. And it's very, very wearing, as you're saying. And so you really have to have such a solid sense of yourself to be able to do that. And that's actually why over the last let's see now, 30, 40, 50, 60, the last 23 or hang on, I don't know, 33 years or whatever it's been, I have run over 210 meditation retreats, which generally go, for anything up to 3 weeks long. Why have I done that? Primarily, I was doing that because the only way I could survive a busy, busy clinic was every 2 months, I would have at least 10 or 9 days or so meditating. And so I would do that for myself. Now I decided, why don't I include other people in this? And this is how I started running meditation retreats. So they come and join me, and they join me at a drop of a hat. And so I was running 10 of these a year, not the shorter ones, about 9 day ones. Yeah, I was running them a year, but this was enabling me, if you like, to fully process and heal the effects of simply coming into contact with this traumatized state in people. This is nothing like being traumatized, absolutely nothing like what it's like to be traumatized. And yet, being a highly sensitive person, I'm feeling that in some ways more than they are. You being a highly sensitive person will feel it often in some ways more than the person who's traumatized at first, because the person who's traumatized has shut down. Yeah, has completely shut down. So for you to come into contact with that on a daily level is unfair, but it's what you've chosen to do. It's not. We're in such a condition here as a species that everybody in our world, most people in our world, desperately need help. Desperately need help, and we can feel that, and we end up needing help ourselves if we're not careful. Yeah. So and we need to know how to take care of ourselves. And I think for me, I was able to work all those years as a very intense practitioner, helping people with really heavy stuff, only because I would spend so much time meditating, so much time just downloading, if you like, just letting my body purge the effects of the last couple of months. And so I'd bounce back and off I'd go again. Oh, and I actually maintained a good state as a result of a good healthiness as a result of that. But my point is, I should never have had to do that in the natural world that I'm part of. I would never have to come into contact with that sort of thing, and people would never be in the conditions that we see them in, where trauma is mostly misunderstood and mostly not, how should I say, not healed. Yeah, not fully healed in people. So the main reason it's very much misunderstood, I think, is because when a person is traumatized as a child, then as time goes on, they're not traumatized once. They're generally in a traumatized family. So the parents before them have been traumatized. So the parents are disassociated. And in that disassociated state, they're able to do tremendous harm repetitively to their children. Which of course create another disassociation or a number of disassociations in the child in order for the child to survive in a very numbed out and disconnected way. And so this disassociation causes a blindness to our own trauma and what's actually going on in our own life, in the sense that we end up in a state where we don't even remember what has happened to us throughout our childhood until certain things trigger that. If they do, certain things may trigger the memories of that. And the memories of that I'm talking about there may trigger the cognitive memory. Yeah. But I'm not so concerned with cognitive memory. Cognitive memory is not necessarily important. What is important is the memory that is known to every single person, whether traumatized or not. And that memory exists in how it feels to be me. It doesn't matter what we've managed to disassociate from. We can only really disassociate from cognitive memory. We don't disassociate successfully from the felt memory in the body. Yeah. And in other words, how it feels to be me. And that is our saving grace. That pain, that disturbance is our savior. We think pain and disturbance and that the unhealthy conditions that we're in are the thing we need to get rid of, that actually they are not. We have to change our relationship with pain. And in changing our relationship with pain, this takes a lot of education, but it also takes a lot of experiential meditationary processes, being meditated, just being with your body as it is and whatever sensations that comes up. What will happen is you begin to heal many of these pains and many of these disturbances without knowing much about them at all, without cognitively understanding what the hell they're about. But the changes that occur in how it feels to be you as you heal them in this way through feeling them are actually permanent. Once you heal something, that same thing does not reoccur. The reason things reoccur is because you haven't actually got to the bottom of it. And the bottom of it exists in the physical sensations of your body. Okay. So you can't do anything about trauma through psychoanalysis. There's nothing you can do there. It's too shallow, it's too superficial, and it's too complex. And in fact, ends up building another disconnected view of yourself that I am this damaged person. It doesn't help very much at all. So I'm not very in favor of it when we're dealing with trauma. When we're dealing with trauma, we're dealing with something serious, something that is remembered by the body, but not necessarily remembered by the thought process, because the thought process has been deliberately disassociated from, yeah, or deliberately manipulated by the person doing the harm. I won't go into this. Is an area that I've had, decades of experience successfully dealing with. So I really do have a very vast understanding of this. So I don't want to overwhelm people with too much information.
Well, I just
At
want to, if
first,
I can interject quickly, because
please
what you
take your
just
time.
said, was about what that is. What you described is actually suppression.
Suppression.
I teach all the time that you don't take a drug for what's happening, because that is not the root. And I understand getting by. I understand that the aspects of suppression. That's an aside. But I mean that
Yeah, of course you
you're
do.
trying to fix something, or you're trying
Yeah,
to heal, really heal,
yeah,
then you don't need to bury it further.
yeah.
You need to bring it out. And when you're doing psychoanalysis, it's just another layer added on.
Yes.
So now that person's operating from the new story that they're given about themselves. The information's still pretty much buried, or the pain thinking was brought up to discuss and repeat the story, which changes the story every time you retell it, and it gets into storytelling. And then your whole history starts to even warp about your experience and in this, as opposed to just getting to it right from the start and unearthing it, pulling at the root and feeling it as you were meant to feel, just like
Mm.
what I teach about, what I learned in school in naturopathic college about the animal kingdom shaking off their trauma
Yeah,
physically, right? Like the
yeah,
polar bear being run and and then they get up and they shake off the experience before they go and get another experience.
yeah,
They actually express it off of their bodies naturally. And we've lost that mechanism completely.
yeah,
Hence all the now somatic style healing coming to the forefront, the trauma release exercises and these sorts of ways of getting really deep into it and physically feeling it to the point where you're shaking, to the point where it's accelerated out of you,
yeah,
that deep. And instead of just layering and layering and layering.
yeah.
So really psychiatry is suppression. And I never really thought of it like that until you described it. So I wanted to bring that up.
Oh, really? Until I described it. Oh, so
Well,
just now.
I never really thought
Oh,
about it like as a true suppressant. I knew it was
yeah,
a band-aid, but I never really thought about it as like the way I think about drugs, as
Yeah.
suppressing. That's just another mind worm that is
Yeah.
now layering, and it's a type of literal pancaking of thought forms over the
Yes.
original
Over
issue.
the
And so
original
that is
self.
the
Mm.
truest suppression you could describe.
So this is brilliant. This is very good. So you've just seen that. That's really good. So many people may be just seeing things
Hmm.
that we're talking to. So essentially, any thinking about yourself is a disassociation and a form of suppression. The only reason you're thinking about yourself is because you don't like the way you are. At some level, you don't like how it is to be you. When you're comfortable, you don't think about something, but when you're disturbed, you think about it. And once the disturbance is over, you stop thinking about it. This is a fundamental thing. Why do we think about something that's bothered us today? Because it's still in it as a disturbance inside of me, in my body. I still feel that. Once I resolve that disturbance, I don't think about it anymore. Good, it's fine, no problem. So disturbance keeps us thinking for a very good reason, because we need to listen to that disturbance. We need to receive that disturbance. But then what we do is we think in the wrong way. By thinking about ourselves to try and fix ourselves, which is the psychoanalysts or the traditional approaches of meditation, is also a disassociation from that natural body that you are, from the one and only thing that you are, the one and only life that you are right now. The only thing you can and do know is as you are sitting here. What you think about that is just hypothetical, actually. Yeah. You can't even think about sadness without screwing that up. So yeah, you get that wrong when you think about it. So it's not something that we can think about. The reason we shouldn't use thinking for trying to understand or unravel ourselves, and I'll make this more clear as I talk, is because we don't need to. That is not what thinking is for. And the reason it doesn't work is because we have another way of doing that, and that's feeling. That's what feeling is for. Feeling is how we heal ourselves, how we come to understand ourselves, and how we unravel ourselves. Thinking about that and try is only going to see, firstly, something wrong with ourselves as we are, and then trying to find a new and improved way to be. So thinking is a reaction to the way we are when we're trying to fix ourselves. And this is a complete misunderstanding, and that causes a suppression. That causes a block. Yeah. So if I'm thinking about myself in a way that I think there's something wrong with me, immediately I am condemning something in myself, and I'm not receptive to it. And I'm trying to change that, and I'm thinking about how I can improve on that.
Hmm.
Now, the fundamental thing here is that we think there's something wrong with ourselves because we feel bad or we feel pain or we feel distress. We have been taught to not like all of those things. We have been taught to not like those by the way we've been treated when we've been hurt. Yeah. When we fall over as a child, we're not left to feel that pain. We're not left to process that sensation. I mean, I don't mean ignore your child when it falls over, but keep the child with its pain. If the child falls over, if a child is distressed psychologically or physically, I would simply support that child in staying with that distress. I'm not going to encourage him, distract him from that distress, because if I can support that child in staying with that physical pain or with that distress, then that child will experience how pain and distress processes itself as a natural healing in the body. Of course, if he's broken his leg, he's in a lot of pain. You're going to be sensible. He may have a painkiller. Yeah, but as soon as I can, as he grows up and learns to understand more about this process, because I'm going to keep that child as he grows up. I'm going to keep him in touch with his pain, in touch with his sensations, not encouraging to get away from it. And I'm going to help him understand experientially that this is a natural and a very big part of our existence, that pain, is a big part of life. So you need to have the right relationship with it. The relationship that the religious people, that the spiritualists, and that the medical profession have with it is completely wrong and is the cause of suffering our pain. The reason we suffer our pain is because we are reacting to it. That causes massive psychological and exaggerated suffering and breaks down our ability, or disconnects us from our pain, which breaks down our natural ability to feel into it, to actually feel it. When we actually just feel our pain or our condition, we don't actually feel suffering. You would be surprised. What you really feel is relief. And
Yes.
everybody has a certain experience of this. When they're in pain, nobody understands how upset they are. They can't get to it themselves. And somebody helps them get in touch with the real crux of the problem. And they feel, when they hit that, oh, that's what it is, or that's what I'm feeling. Oh, when they hit that, they feel understood. Yeah, and they feel relief. So their healing happens. Yeah. So if we really feel understood, we only feel understood because we ourselves have managed to come in contact with the actual feeling inside of us of how that pain exists as part of us, not separate to it, but as part of us. There's no escape from it. When we come into contact with that, there is an immediate healing begins. And that's the difference between harmful pain, pain that's harming us, which is, we know it hurts when I put my hand on a fire. That pain is saying, get away from pain, it's harmful. But we also have pain that is after that's happened, when it's healing. Yeah. And there may be pain during that healing process, and that pain is very important, but that's healing pain. Now, what people have done is come with the way in which we treated pain through and so-called suffering, through bringing our ideas into life about how life should be, that it shouldn't be suffering, that we shouldn't have pain, that we shouldn't have sickness, and so on, and that it's bad, it's wrong, it suggests there's something wrong with you, you're a lesser person or whatever, rather than this is part of life, and a very big part of life, that somehow we have to be able to embrace. And I know in the New Age era, we used to talk about accepting it and thinking perhaps we should like it. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. You don't have to like it. Then what is acceptance? Acceptance is acknowledgement of a fact. That's it. Acknowledgement of a fact that you can do nothing about. And to accept, you can do nothing about it. The acceptance, acknowledgement of a fact. Yeah, acknowledgement of a fact is also acknowledgement of what you do know. You may not want to know that. You may not want to know that. You may not want it to be that way, but you know it is that way, and you know you can do nothing about it. So someone asked me this question in a podcast last week, a very interesting question. What is the one question that you've been looking for the answer for your whole life? And I said, there are no questions. There are only answers. If you are living as a sensory creature, you'll find that life is a constant experience of answers. Yeah. And that answers are, I am like this. I feel like this. Life is like that. It's raining. It's hot. It's cold. I'm hungry. These are my constant answers. Yeah. And they are coming at me all the time. This person is annoying. Yeah, that's my answer. So I've got to deal with that. I may have to process, go through an interaction with that person. Bottom line is, the psychological illness is primarily a reaction to the things in life that we don't like and we want them to be different. This is a psychological illness. And we've been taught to exist psychologically ill. We have been taught to react to the facts of life. Religion is a reaction to the facts of reality. Yeah. Spirituality is a reaction to the fact that you are a living organism and that one day you're going to die. And I don't want to put that as a conclusive comment, but I want to say that is a significant thing. One day you're going to die. The spiritualist doesn't want to die. They want to live forever. Yeah. And so they create this fantasy that can never be substantiated because we only have now, and now we are a physical living being, and that's all we ever have. So, this relationship with pain is really, really important, and very important that we first first discover through our natural sensations that are there how to be with the feeling of that, so that we can feel the relief of that. And in feeling the relief of that, we also feel the healing process of that, or allow the healing process of that, of the body doing it for itself to its own natural end. This also helps us break down our fear and misunderstanding of the significance of pain and illness in our life. Now, that's the first step. You may want to, say something about that. Then we need that before we can even go into trauma. Trauma is, that's an everyday person, pain. Yeah. Now, how do we deal with trauma? This is another level altogether. But you may want to put something
Yeah, I
into
just
this.
had, I get all these, uh, what was,
It's
what
important.
was implicated here was about parenting. I would cringe. My body would physically react anytime I hear a parent saying, walk it off, suck it up, just dismissing their child's experience. And ironically, that will make a weak character, a
For
weak
sure.
individual, because they do not know their own pain. If you feel the pain in the moment, and the parent guides the child and holds the child in support as they process that pain in that support,
Yes.
they will become stronger individuals, more grounded and real and authentic and true, and not as easily traumatized and separated, not as easily swayed by every flitting idea. They
Yeah.
become solidified in their own sense of self because
Exactly.
they are allowed to go through those, in a sense, natural rituals of process of accepting
Hmm.
their existence, of their natural being.
Yeah.
And to then, so the warped idea is to tell the child they have to be strong by ignoring their pain, but it's the exact
Yeah.
opposite.
It's the
And
opposite.
that's how you make bullies. That's how you make probably politicians, you
Of
know,
course.
all of these sorts of dissociated beings that we see ruining the world right now. So
Yeah.
that was where my thoughts were going when you were talking about that, where my natural gut was just, oh, that. And I would sometimes, when I could, just go to that child and subvert the parent, and and check in with the
Yeah.
child, who you can just, if you just look at them, you can see that that's wrong answer. They're not good, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so, and even through like natural gentle style of parenting, which I employed with my child, and she was having temper tantrums that I couldn't control when her father abandoned her, and I didn't. Here I was doing total gentle parenting, and now I have like rage coming out of this child, and I just had to let her. I just had to be with her and let her express it, instead of saying stop or be quiet or don't cry or it's okay, it's going to be okay. Even that, why would I? Because I'm uncomfortable of the sound. We'd go out in
Yeah.
public, the child is crying, you're like, shh, you're embarrassing me, and this kind of stuff. No, if it was a healthy community, the community would come around the
Yeah.
child and
Yeah.
support the parents, and
Yeah.
allow, and then it would complete, and it would be finished, and that
Yeah.
child would be better for it. Everyone would be better for it. That's profound.
So our relationship with pain as an adult is distorted because of our own incorrect approach to pain, and therefore our failure with dealing with pain, meaning that we just end up suffering. Yeah. Rather than feeling it and responding to it intelligently and sensitively in ourselves. So if we can do that with ourselves, what we're talking about there too is whatever is going on inside of me, whatever it is, whether it's rage, sadness, fear, hunger, whatever the sensation is, it's very important that every human being understands that every sensation that goes on inside of them is going on is what it is to be a human being. Therefore, every sensation that they are having, every other human being also is filled with those sensations. But to the degree that we interfere with those sensations by our mental reactions to those sensations, to the same degree we will exaggerate and distort those sensations and prolong the experience of them beyond their otherwise natural duration. They will come to their own end. Yeah. And this is where, with natural meditation, you're learning to be with the sensations of you in the body, whatever sensations are going on, without wanting one more than another. And what happens is, at first you may want one more than another, but once you actually have success, which you rapidly will start having success with uh, coming into contact with some pain and actually having it dissipate, like you mentioned about your migraine, this gives you the confidence and breaks down your fear of pain. It gives you the confidence at the same time to do it again, to do it next time. And the more you allow your pain to be there and just feel it, or whatever sensation happens to be there, the more this will be your experience. And not only will your experience be that you actually resolve the disturbance in that, but your mental clarity improves because the mental clarity is disturbed by unresolved disturbances in the body. The body is needing attention. The attention that it needs is simply to be felt as it is, actually. That is the most immediate and powerful attention you can give yourself, is to just be yourself, feel what it is to be yourself. So feeling yourself helps you to discover for yourself that you can resolve pain or distress, whether it's physical or psychological, that you come back to the sensation. If it's a psychological pain, come back to the sensation in your body, and wherever that happens to be in your body, come back to the sensation of that in your body, that disturbance that your mental situation or your practical situation is causing you. Come back to the disturbance of that in your body and feel that, rather than being caught up in the external thoughts about everything. Internalize, come back to the feeling, and notice that that sensation is there. Whether you like it or not, it's going to be there until you feel it. And once you feel it, you start to get a better understanding of yourself from that. This is a developmental experience. So you start to discover that pain and illness is actually a call for understanding yourself, a need to understand yourself more than you currently do, not intellectually, but experientially. So you come to understand yourself, and the understanding that comes is a felt understanding and a felt acknowledgement of yourself and your needs at the time. And so you're learning to, you're actually responding to yourself not in a fixed way, but in a fluid way. So however you happen to feel today, you're feeling that. But being with that feeling changes your relationship with pain over time, to the point where anybody who's done this work with me in my life, they're a very different type of person. They all are. They don't have any interest in not having their pain or distress. They never want to ignore it. They never want to go away from it. They want that to be there when it's there, because they know that from experience that when that's there, it's there for a good reason. And if I pay attention to that, if I connect properly with that, without any thought process to try and fix it or change it in any way, that this will unravel something in me that is causing me trouble all over the place in my life anyway. It's a distress inside of me that comes out in many different ways. And by healing that at its origin as a sensation in the body, you are actually hearing, you could be healing a dozen different things at once that you do as an expression of these. Or you think about, how many things in life do you fear? You say, oh, I'm frightened of 100 things. Really? Good. Feel your fear. And once you get over your fear of fear, then you find you're not frightened of those 100 different things. It really is a powerful resolution. I'm saying that very quickly, I know. It's a very powerful resolution when you come back to the origin of the problem. The origin of the problem will be the origin of many ways in which that problem plays out in your day-to-day life. And you start to appreciate the significance of unresolved pain and disturbances in your body. But it's got to be in your body. The most important thing is you're only going to get to the core of the issue as a felt sensation, wherever it happens to be in your body. So you don't need to intellectually know that. Um, but in the app there is a section on the mind body connection, which I encourage people to use when they go to a certain area in the app for, oh, I've got this problem, I've got that problem. It is explained, because I'm able to explain that very accurately, because fundamentally we all have the same function going on inside of us. And if to understand yourself as a human being and how we function is actually, I found, how we actually understand how every human being functions fundamentally. So this will help in that way, that you'll get to understand whereabouts in my body am I harboring this condition and the origin of this behavior or the origin of this illness. And by finding that in yourself and being with the feeling of that, you really do activate the healing process on a very natural level. And this is very helpful. But one thing I was going to say about the child you mentioned, um, not just children, but adults, if we're really struggling when we're going through a healing process, it is very nice to have someone uh, understanding to be there. Yeah, it's very helpful to be contained. It's very helpful. Not to be interfered with, but to be contained. And usually that requires physical contact. Yeah, some sort of physical contact is also very helpful. I've always found with a child who's, especially traumatized children, when they're going through a rage explosion, that sometimes the therapist would say, just let them go everywhere, let them, go crazy, physically move about and so forth. But when you think about it, when you're going through that type of traumatic convulsion, if you can contain that through stillness, you're able to reduce the dramatics of that, and it becomes actually easier for the process to happen. So I find that I would take a child and literally I might have to physically contain and hold that child, as long as that child's not going through some, perhaps a fear of adults. Obviously you're not going to do that, or fear of men or fear of women, then that's not going to work. But if the child is going through, you are its parent and it's not you they're frightened of, but they're going through something that is purging and they're going crazy. If you contain them, if you hold them, they're going to fight you and they're going to struggle against you. And then they'll gradually it'll dissipate, it will calm down. You're actually forcing them to come into contact with the feeling of it, rather than chucking a tantrum out of an attempt to get rid of that feeling. So they're trying to get rid of a feeling that they need to contain. And we're always doing this. We're always trying to get rid of our feelings, which really we need to do the opposite. We need to contain them. How do we contain them? We contain them in our body, by feeling it in our body. So that's just something I thought I'd throw into that.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially even from what I just mentioned about trauma release exercises, where it's the idea where, well, that particular study is suggesting that the molecules of trauma, the cortisol, for example, when we experience that from a molecular side of things, that the
Yes,
body holds physical stuff, and so
yes,
you're working that out. You're working out the muscle memory of it.
yes,
So in a way, there's two different things there going on. And then you're suggesting that in a case where the child is flailing in, this
yeah,
isn't a controlled state. Like a trauma release exercise is a very controlled state, ultimately, even though you're releasing. But
yeah,
the child is not in control
no,
and doesn't know what to really do to contain. So it's interesting to help them contain it
yeah,
and then be present with them through it and not hushing them and shushing them and or telling them what to think or anything like that. Just the physical, you don't even have to say anything. Just grab them and hold them,
Yeah,
you know?
just the physical stillness or the physical containment. It's
Yeah.
actually a support for them. It will, it's actually, that's what you're there for. As an adult, you're there to guide the child through the difficulties of life. He's not ready to just do it on his own, especially if he's got something really heavy going down.
Yeah.
You need to be there. But if if you don't understand the nature of pain because you've tried to avoid your own pain, then you tend to avoid his pain or her pain. Yeah. Where when you are not avoiding your own pain, and you through this process, people start to understand how to process their pain, how to deal with a trauma as well. I'm not going into trauma that much just yet. And in helping their child in this way, the child is actually learning the way to do it. And as they grow up, they're learning to contain their feelings. Yeah. And like the old thing, like the Rajneesh, the Osho Rajneesh, the Bhagwan. I don't know if you remember him in the old days,
Hmm.
but they have this dynamic meditation. Yeah. Now, and the dynamic meditation was to allow your body to express whatever in whatever way it wanted to. And this is perfectly fine. But the subtlety is when I do that to get rid of or change the way I'm feeling, I'm actually attacking the way I am. I'm not integrating it. I'm not integrating with it. And the trouble with that is we're not actually coming to terms with that sensation, with that experience, with that feeling. We're not actually making friends with it. We're not actually embodying it. We're trying to get it out of our body. Yeah. So anything that's trying to change the way you are is another form of disassociation from the way you are. And the only reason you want to disassociate from the way you are is because you're frightened of it. And you're frightened of it because you don't understand it. And you don't understand it because you haven't yet come into full contact with it and let it process. If that makes sense. So it's very important. Stillness is a very good thing. Physical stillness is a very good thing for a healing process. But nothing needs to be rigid. With trauma, it's very tricky that the person themselves often needs to be still and contained, but maybe in an environment rather than physically, especially if they've been physically abused through their life. They will have fear of men or fear of women, and this makes it and not cognitive fear necessarily, not fear they understand, but if their trauma is starting to come back to them, their memories that have been suppressed are starting to come back to them. There is a certain degree of the body memory, the feeling of that is also suppressed, a certain degree of it, and that can come back. And as that comes back to them in meditation or in being still with themselves, that's really demystify it. If being physically still, then this will bring back all the fears, all the illogical, the fears and disturbances and terror that they have from what happened to them when they were little. So the memory of what it was like to be them when they were little, when that comes back today, they're going to have a hard time not connecting that with life today. And so they distort their experience of life today and their view of life today because of how they experience life as a child. And so it's very important to have opportunities like meditation retreats or meditation environments where you can actually be still and quiet long enough to get to those depths in your body, or I should say, no, this is mistaken, not to get to those depths, but to allow those depths in your body to come back to life naturally within you. Yeah. The reason I corrected myself there is because you can't go looking for it. If you go looking for it and try and trigger it, that's a very terrified little person in there. It's going to pull away. It's not natural. Let it happen naturally. It'll be fast enough. Yeah. So I'm not with trauma. It will come out and it will start as just pain in the body, physical pain in the body, in the area of the body where the trauma is. The memory of the trauma is actually held, and then that will gradually come to life as more pain and more disturbance. And so you're just feeling the pain and disturbance in the initial stages, not usually getting the cognitive recognition or memory because you're not ready for that. Yeah. You'll be more ready for that once you've been able to acknowledge and feel and heal to a certain extent the disturbance that is inside of you, because otherwise it'll be too overwhelming for you to remember something. Yeah, that you cognitively. This is memory anyway. People forget that memory is actually originates as a physical tension in the body, and that's how it's held there, as physical tension in the body. It's not somewhere as a thought process going on. Yeah, the thought process is not there. The thought process has submerged into the sensation of information that's held as a sensation in the body. I'm saying a lot there, I realize, but trauma is a memory held in the body for sure. But the sensation of trauma drives our behaviors and distorts our experience of how we view life and how we receive life. It will distort our relationships. It will distort everything, everything. And it just makes life, which is normally simple, incredibly difficult for a person. So those people listening, how do you know that you have trauma? Generally, a trauma I would put down to as different to just being hurt or pain or caused pain is something that was so overwhelming at the time that you had to block it out in order to survive. So obviously there's varying degrees of trauma. I would say an education in school is traumatic to the intelligence of the human being. Religion is traumatic. Belief systems are traumatic. They traumatize because they disassociate the person from their natural intelligence and their natural ability to understand life as it is, as it's happening. So this is traumatizing, but not in the real serious sense of when you're abused and hurt. We know about this with war veterans and so forth, but much deeper than that, going back, it's still the same fundamental thing where the person is treated in or treats another person in such a way that they traumatize themselves, because it's completely foreign and unnatural to the body to do this to another body, to another living being. So trauma is something which I've noticed goes through, with serious trauma, will take some time to heal. But each time you come into contact with it, what you're going to experience is tremendous terror, tremendously overpowering sensations that you can't afford to mentalize. Yeah, you can't afford to ask yourself, what is this? Why is this here? You don't need to ask why and what. You just need to know that it is here, and that is the proof of trauma. You know you have this terrible feeling inside of you, a terrible experience going on inside of you, that you don't understand why it's there. That just means there's no cognitive connection. This doesn't mean it's not real. This doesn't mean you're making it up. You're not making it up because it's coming out of you. So it wouldn't be there. You wouldn't be experiencing it if it hadn't gone in there at some point in your life. And this is just my experience of working with people successfully to the end of their healing. And people don't have to take what I'm saying as gospel. Of course, you've got to understand this for yourself. But memory in the body is something that doesn't age with time. It doesn't change over time. Memory that we repeat over and over and over, like Chinese whispers, we repeat that. This is a thought process and something, oh yeah, I've always known that, but by the time I tell somebody about it when I'm old, I've really changed it. Yeah. Whereas memory that's held in the body, anybody who's been traumatized and has recognized that, realize that memory held in the body is also frozen. It's a feeling of being frozen. Yeah. And it literally is frozen. And it's never, in that sense, it remains as it was when it first happened. Or this is my understanding of it, my experiential understanding of it, and also I'm highly sensitized to this condition in people, having worked with it so much that to me it's my day job. Yeah, it's something that I just understand because I've worked it out, and I've worked it out as an experiential process. It's very uncommon. It's very unfamiliar to most people, so it sounds really, out there or highly intelligent. It's not necessarily highly intelligent or highly complicated. It just happens to be what I do. Yeah, and I've worked it out. It's like if I go to a mechanic, I find myself, amazed at what he can say and understand. I don't understand motor cars, but this is my area, and to me, it's straightforward and simple. But I have always made sure that there's got to be proof in the pudding. And that's how we can check that you're on the right track. If what we're doing isn't working, then we're probably not on the right track. But if what we're doing is actually getting the results of helping a person resolve their trauma and no longer live in misery, then this is a very real effect. This is, to me, proof in the pudding.
Yes. Yeah, I always look for that's the same process with me. As much as
I
you
knew
learn and read,
that.
yeah, you read books, you do whatever, right? But it comes down to the clinical effect or the what are the outcomes of the application of what you of the knowledge or of the technique. What do you get to the end at the end? And if you are honest with yourself, then because there are people who won't be practitioners who will suppress and think they've done something, right? But if you're honest
Yes.
with yourself, you will see full healing and full resolve. And I always saw my litmus test as people kind of forget they were ever in the imbalanced state. They it's as
Oh,
if the memory is literally it's
it's
so
gone.
complete. It's
Yeah.
integrated, it's out, it's done. And they don't even need to rehash the story so much. They don't need to,
No,
it's they've moved on, and
it's
that's
moved.
like a
Yeah.
mark of really it's healed at that
Well,
point.
that's very well put, really well explained. It proves that the disturbance, when they're not needing to talk about it anymore, it shows that the disturbance of the presence of that unhealed trauma has actually processed, healed, and no longer exists as a disturbance inside that individual. What
Yes.
more could you want? That's all you
Yes.
need. Yeah,
That's
that
what.
means you're clean. You're clean of that, so you can experience yourself as the person you really are before you were damaged.
The lightness of being.
So,
The burdens are lifted at that point because it is as empty
yeah.
as it feels, it's heavy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow.
So,
This has been profound, let's say.
oh, okay.
And
Good.
I think that people, this is time for people to do this now. This is like we're at a crisis point in so many ways, and the traumas are adding up.
Yes.
And more and more people are in grave distress, and so this is really needed now for where we're at. And if only we could go back and fix it at the beginning. Sometimes I fantasize that kind of stuff. All of this is so unnecessary, but then I have to say, but I don't know, because all I know is where I'm at, and how do I know the grand plan for our experiences? But I do know that we weren't meant to suffer, and we weren't meant to continue to languish in suffering. If it wants to hone us into something or mold us into something, that's a temporary experience. It's not meant to linger. It's not meant to be ongoing. It's not meant to be generational. It's not meant to be handed down to next generations. You own what you have, and you learn from it. But we've been passing the buck for too long,
Yeah.
and we can see the results of
Yeah.
that in our societies. So for viewers, you can go to undoapp.com. You can download it right off the website. It's a free trial, so you can get familiar with it and feel comfortable. Some people ask me, they're a bit daunted by apps and things, and I say, well, this walks you through it. You're not sort of lost at sea. There is a process that's walking you through stages and steps in the app. And would you speak, Matthew, to, are you still doing retreats now? Like, are you seeing clients? Could you tell me a little bit more about
Yes.
that?
Okay. I will be organising to start running meditation retreats again. These are really powerful because the thing about a meditation retreat is if the I could never understand why meditation retreats, which are very serious things, in the sense of what comes up for people, why they were run by novices, because I think it's just not adequate. And that's probably because most people are novices. Yeah. So there's very few people know what the hell they're doing when they're dealing with this sort of thing. And that's not anybody's fault. It's a very complicated area. It takes a lot of experience to gain. Uh, so I think what's very, very powerful about the retreats that I run is, one, the direct nature of the meditation enables you to go deep very quickly. And it's allowing whatever condition you're in to show itself as it's ready to. And that also tends to happen quite quick enough, plenty quick enough. But the difficulties that people typically have with meditation, you won't have with this approach to meditation. Once you understand it on a retreat, even if you've never done a retreat before, usually by the third day, a beginner would be sitting, usually no trouble sitting for 2 hours without moving with this approach. And not because they're trying to be disciplined, but because there's a completely different approach that is receptive to yourself rather than trying to make yourself do something and achieve something. And the only benefit of that example then is because when you sit for a longer period of time, when you can, as you understand your relationship with pain and it improves, you find that this gives the traumas or any sort of healing or change that needs to happen in the body a chance to really happen. And it's a very deep, gradual process. However, whatever tends to happen on retreat tends to stay with you afterwards. Yeah, because the change happens. As I say, I often say change has to happen on a physical level. Mental change is irrelevant. You can change your mind anytime you like, but if something doesn't change at a biological level, it hasn't changed. In other words, your body will go through a change exactly the way you just mentioned. As you process something that's stuck in there, your body will improve in the way it's functioning, and improve in its overall health and condition. And with the app, I think there was also a promo code they could use with you.
Yep.
Yeah. So you need
Yeah.
to mention that for them to get the benefit of that. So if they
Yeah.
use a
They get a
promo,
month off, I
you
think,
get
a
a month
month.
off. So
Yeah.
please don't hesitate to let them know what that promo code is when you're ready. I'm actually a body worker as well, although I don't do a lot. That's how my work began, was deep tissue massage, osteopathy, and all that. So that's where I developed the understanding of. I haven't got a chance to talk about my history on this
Wow.
program, but we'll do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how I actually discovered all this, it was my own discovery. It's not something that I could discover from anybody else, because as far as I knew it through my life, nobody else knew it. So I was discovering it as I went. So I'm a very my ability as a body worker, helping people with trauma in their body, and it just people have problems in their body. If I'm as a massage and osteopathic point of view, I get very good results there, and they're more permanent there than usual because of dealing with the deeper underlying thought processes and traumas is also part of that body work. I have a book which is only the first. You may have seen this, but I'll just show everybody. Is that upside down? No, that's correct. It
That's
just
good.
looks that way. So this
Yeah.
book is also available on Amazon, I think. Yeah, on Amazon. And what this actually is a companion guide for the app. It's really, as you know, the app has a primary version and a go deeper version of each topic. This is just the primer version. So they can use this on the way through. It's also a nice read. We just put that together. So that book is available. I'm available for counselling as well. What I call counselling is very different to what you would have experienced. Most people would have experienced from the typical counsellor, in the sense that I can work quite well, very well actually, over the internet. So I have international clients talking to me over the internet to help them through whatever process they're going through, and I can do a lot of deep work with people over the internet. Actually, I have that sensitivity and ways to do that to help them process whatever they're going through, but also to help them understand cognitively what they're going through, so they can deal with it more effectively themselves. For that, you just contact me through the web page. And I want to teach people to teach natural meditation, and also training people again in my approach to body work and healing. This is just later on through the year, I'll get this going. I think that's about it. I think I've said everything. Yeah.
Yeah,
That I need to
that's
say for now. Yeah.
amazing. Amazing. Now I'm like, oh, maybe I do need to go to Australia.
Oh, I'd
Because
love to get you there.
I'd love to be a teacher of that.
Oh,
But
oh no, that would
so,
be available online as well. I think because I'll
oh,
be, yeah, yeah, for sure. Because particularly for people who are resonating from who have a life experience. Like, I haven't worked out exactly who I would be helping to teach this, but I think it would probably mostly be those who have already gone quite a long way on their own, so they're actually able to really communicate this correctly, to people who they're teaching. But it's incredibly simple, as you know. It's incredibly simple, but I also think it's important to have a good understanding of this before you start teaching it to other people. So someone like yourself, of course, I have no trouble at all. So, so that can be learnt online. I expect to run these courses online as well. I know we've only just touched on trauma today. Well, actually, we've talked quite a bit about it, but perhaps we've touched on a lot of things here today. Perhaps when the time comes, when you've got time, I know you're incredibly busy, perhaps we can go a lot further into this. But I'm really happy that we went a long way into the natural meditation today, and that you, being a lifetime practitioner of meditation, were able to share your experience of seeing the subtle yet very important difference between this approach to meditation and the traditional approaches. Because one of the main things I want to do is demystify meditation, demystify enlightenment, so that people can see that your own natural state is already happening, it's already there. Whatever condition you're in is part of that natural state, because whatever you've been through has got you into that state. Nothing wrong with that state. You simply have to allow you need to know how to get in touch with that in a way that enables that healing process to continue. Yeah. So in that sense, the natural person each one of us are a different person because of what we've been through. And there's nothing wrong with the effects or with how we've ended up. This is actually correct. We should have ended up that way. We shouldn't have ended up any other way. That would mean that the intelligence of the body had gone astray. But the intelligence of the body is that it absolutely expresses that person, everything they've been through. And that expression will be in pain, in illness, and different things, and in our personalities. But all of these need to be plumbed the depths of, in a way, as we need to. And we can. And if we do, we won't have to do it in a complicated way, but in a very direct and powerful way, which is what is the way in which nature itself deals with its own problems. And it deals with its own problems as long as we do not disassociate from those problems into ideas about ourselves and ideas about those problems. Yeah. And just
yeah.
back to the pure sense of the problem as it exists as a sensation in our body. It's very simple, but it's very powerful. But I've talked a lot, and thanks again, Amanda. This was our first talk, you and I, and yeah, I thought it was going to be very interesting, and I'm glad you spoke a lot too. So hopefully we will do it again.
I would love to. I would like to
Anytime.
dive deeper into the
Yeah,
whole trauma picture.
I think it's a good
As
idea.
I think it's a good idea as well.
We can
So
take this a
we'll,
long way. I can take this a
yeah,
long way. We're just touching the surface of it here.
yeah,
And but we'll work out between us, or any other way we can, whatever we'd like to talk about. Yeah.
very much so. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for everything. Thank you for
Thank you.
today. Thank you to our audience listening.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can always find my videos at yummy.doctor, and there we'll have clips for you as well, excerpts and things. And the code is yummy. I think it's yummy 23.
So, yes, Yummy 23 is the code.
Got
Use
it.
that to get the bonus,
Yep.
whatever that is. Yeah, I let the
Ah,
marketers take care of that. I think it's a
yeah.
month off, like you said. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's good if they use that code too, because um, this is helping all around. It helps the whole thing flow. So
It's very
thank
important.
you.
I know that there'll be you'll be busy from from this too, because people need
Good.
relief that's real. People are looking for
Yeah.
genuine, authentic, and real. They're tired of the fake and the illusion
Yeah.
and the overlays and the suppression and the escapism and the addiction. It's just, we know that's not the
Doesn't
way
work.
to go.
Yeah.
And we're looking for answers, and there's an answer right here. And so thank you again. This was
Yeah.
Matthew Zoltan, Undo App, undoapp.com, yummy.doctor, Amanda Vollmer here, signing off. Love you all. You're amazing. And we'll talk to you very soon. Bye for now.
Cool. Thank you, Amanda. Bye.